So I think by now we're all pretty familiar with Spider-Man's origin story, or at least the basic idea. Teenage boy gets bitten by a radioactive spider, his uncle gets killed because of some guy he didn't stop, and then boom, superhero. It's a story that's been retold a number of times across live-action movies, animated TV episodes, and even video games for some reason. But like with most stories that are told again and again and again until we're all dead, there's a sort of drift that happens every time where each version keeps kind of pulling from the last one, creating this weird game of telephone where the basic pieces are the same, but the original context gets just completely lost in the shuffle. So today I actually want to take a look back at that original context and go over how the story was originally told, all the way back in Amazing Fantasy number 15. This isn't the actual comic, by the way. This is just one of these things.
So our story begins in 1962 at Midtown High School, where we meet a shy bookworm named Peter Parker. The kind of guys that, if a fun date, is taking girls over to the school science lab.
I mean, it's not like I got any better ideas, so...
He's also super bitter about not being all that popular, which makes him kind of a strange mix between lovable dork and whiny, jaded incel.
Yeah, not a huge surprise. Most versions of this story tend to focus on that first part rather than the second part, because that part is infinitely easier to root for and tolerate. And luckily for us, Peter doesn't stay like this forever.
And as I'm sure you all know, Peter lives with longtime supporting character Aunt May and the not-to-be-gotten attached to Uncle Ben. Two characters who hold the distinction of being the only two characters Peter likes in this entire comic. And all is well until one fateful day where Peter decides to attend a demonstration on controlling radioactive rays in a high-tech laboratory. A demonstration that, by the way, is being held in the science hall of this random-ass high school in Forest Hills, Queens.
Dang, I wish my high school had that kind of budget.
And while this big crazy machine gets turned on, a spider with the worst luck ever ends up getting caught right in the middle of it all and proceeds to get lit up like a Christmas tree. It then finds itself on Peter's hand and bites him right before immediately dying. And with this random string of right place, right time out of the way, our boy Peter suddenly gets really dizzy, wanders out into the middle of the street, and almost gets himself run over. Good news is, he just got himself a brand new set of spider powers, and casually jumps onto the side of a wall. He then starts scaling the wall, and there's like this whole bit where like a kid sees him, tries to tell his mom, and she thinks he's been watching too many horror movies. It's not super relevant, but I think it's really funny.
And so, within minutes of discovering that he just got actual superpowers, Peter does the one thing in his big motion situation. He tries to get some goddamn money out of it. Truly the Everyman superhero.
So his plan is to get into a wrestling ring with a big guy named Crusher Hogan, all while wearing a mask to avoid embarrassing himself if he loses. So the match ends pretty quickly, with Peter managing to get a flawless victory. He ends up being a huge hit with the crowd and walks out of there with a nice crisp $100.
But unlike the 2002 movie, this is 60s money, so it's actually a really good deal. I also find it kind of funny that in that same movie, Tobey Maguire gets his ass handed to him for like most of that wrestling match. But this Peter just sort of walks in and just instantly wins. What are you even doing, Toby?
On the way out, Peter is approached by a TV producer who offers him the chance of a lifetime to perform live in a primetime slot without ever having to reveal his identity.
That lucky son of a bitch.
After that, Peter goes home for a bit while we're reminded that Man Ben still exists. Then he builds himself a pair of wrist-mounted web shooters, makes himself a cool new costume, and boom! Spider-Man is born. And now we enter part 2 of the story, and yeah, it's actually broken up like this. As Spider-Man starts doing cool tricks on national TV, and ends up becoming an overnight sensation. After his first big broadcast, Spider tries to go home when a thief runs past him while being chased by a cop. Spidey casually stands like a mannequin as the thief runs into the elevator and escapes scot-free. Then the cop just kind of gives up on the whole thing and starts giving Spidey hell by not doing his job for him.
So, you're not gonna chase the other guy, or,
In response, Peter basically tells him where he can shove it, and then walks off.
Sure up this whole thing doesn't come to bite him in the ass later.
So then Peter gets home and is just given a cool new microscope by his aunt and uncle. No, it's not like it's his birthday or anything. They just one day went out and bought him a microscope, like, out of the blue. How nice, right?
Gee, I sure hope nothing bad happens.
Peter then tests out his new microscope while thinking to himself, "Oh, May and Ben are the only two people that have ever been kind to him, and now the rest of the world can go ahead and hang for all he cares." Our friendly neighborhood superhero, ladies and gentlemen. Over the course of the next few days, Peter's TV career ends up really taking off. In that time, he manages to sell out an auditorium, get picked up for his own TV show, and win himself an award. All without anyone discovering who he truly is. But then, one fateful night, Peter returns home to find a police car sitting in front of their house. A cop tells him that a burglar broke in, robbed the place, and then gave Uncle Ben the old 1-2-10 treatment.
Jarring and surprising while reading this in the 60s, not so much today.
The cop also tells him that the thief in question is currently hiding out at the old abandoned Acme warehouse.
Yep, tell him exactly where to find his uncle's killer. I'm sure he won't try to do anything insane in that situation. So naturally, Peter is pissed about his uncle being murdered in cold blood and decides to confront the thief personally. Probably not to murder him, but it's not really clear exactly what he's planning. But either way, Spidey runs off, web swings for the very first time, and goes to the old abandoned Acme warehouse to get his revenge. The cops surround the warehouse, but unfortunately can't charge the place because they're about as useful as an Applebee's gift card. The burglar hides out in there for a while, only for Spidey to break in and scare the absolute hell out of him. He also doesn't seem to know who or what Spidey is despite running right past him earlier. I mean, I think I remember the guy in the bright red bodysuit, but he was getting chased by the cops at the time, so I'm just gonna let him have this one. So after disarming the Uncle Killer and getting a few good licks in, Peter takes one good look at the guy's face and realizes that it's the exact same crook from the TV station. Safe to say he's kicking himself pretty damn hard right now. So then he wraps up the crook and has a brief existential crisis before going home. And a lean, silent figure slowly fades into the gathering darkness, aware at last that in this world, with great power, there must also come great responsibility. And that's the first time the iconic mantra was ever said. In a caption box in the last panel of the story. So, yeah, Uncle Ben never said that line, by the way. Like, ever. At least not in the comics. I think the first time it got attributed to him was actually in the 2002 movie. And if I can be honest, I don't like that as much. I really don't. Because it's the circumstances and context of Ben's death that taught me the lesson. If May had died, it would have produced the exact same results. I mean, having Peter be told beforehand is just kind of redundant. Plus, it gives Ben this weird characterization as this wise sage mentor who taught Peter the exact lesson he needed to learn, exactly when he needed to learn it. But did such a bad job that he literally died. But yeah, the comic just ends. It ends with Peter walking away into the night. Sad, alone, and utterly defeated. Feel good story, right? You know, something else that I've noticed gets kind of glossed over in adaptations is the actual rise and fall of Peter. I mean, sure, a lot of versions have it kind of baked in there a little bit, but it's never usually as central as it is in this story. I mean, Peter spends the entire comic as this bitter, angry kid who would happily watch the world burn, but then at the end gets brought crashing down by the consequences of his own actions. It's entirely a story about humbling him, about knocking him back down a peg. And notice a lot of the versions that tend to keep this aspect also do this thing where they give him some third party to screw him over first. And then he doesn't have the third party out, so yeah, because why would they have them out? They screwed him over. But no, he doesn't even screw over this time. He's just a dick. He's just a bitter, angry dick who has to learn the hard way that sometimes it doesn't pay to be a bitter, angry dick. You know, I feel like a reason a lot of these changes happen is from new writers trying to streamline the story to fit into their adaptation. Because this comic's almost never adapted by itself. It's usually in part of other things, like, say, it's in flashbacks in a cartoon episode, or it's the first act of a movie. It's never isolated. So what they're usually going to do is trying to take this whole narrative and trying to condense it to be part of a larger narrative. Like, for instance, I think having the wrestling match and burglar sequence and Ben's death all being tied into one sequence in the 2002 movie is actually a really good way to do that story. Like, you take all of those things, a huge chunk of the comic, but you tell it in only really a few minutes of movie time. It's actually remarkably efficient. I mean, to be fair, the story is only like 11 pages long, so it's not that hard, but still. Then there's also the fact that writers tend to try to make Peter more likable at this point in time, just so they can tell a full story about the friendly neighborhood superhero as the friendly neighborhood superhero. Which is something this comic just didn't have to worry about, since it's all one story, and, I mean, they didn't know what they were going to do with Peter after this. Hell, they probably didn't think they were going to get more of Peter after this. The publisher didn't even want Spider-Man to exist at all. Like, none of this was ever supposed to exist in the first place, which is so funny, considering just how popular it ended up being. And yeah, that's all I've got for you today. I am planning to come back and actually cover more of the classic run of Spidey comics, so if you're interested, feel free to come back if you want to learn what happened after this one. But until then, I've never recorded an outro before, so here is a very abrupt ending.